The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, so good morning. We'll do the roll call, please. Cheryl Campbell, Devin Swanson, Karen Black, Robert Musser, Brenda Defoe Supranut, Bryant Smith, Abigail Morgan, Jared Francis, Rob Strong, Liz Allward, Frank Watabe, Brad Parrish, Scott Morgan,
Here.
Cliff Graham, Terry Jordan. Did I miss anybody that's physically here in the room? Oh, I'm so sorry, Steve. And I believe we do not have any virtual attendance. Okay, so we've got a quorum.
All right, thank you
Mr.
very
Chair.
much. Item 3 is public comment on items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment on things within the jurisdiction of the Space Coast TPO that citizens would like to comment on? Seeing none, we will move to item 4, which is our executive director's report.
Good morning, members. Welcome. Wanted to give you a few highlights of things that have been happening. You also, in your package, you have the Central Florida MPO Alliance meeting highlights and a presentation links that are included. The Central Florida MPO Alliance met on April the 9th, 2021. The statewide MPO AC, which is the MPO statewide council, met on April the 29th. And they gave some highlights on the latest legislative actions that did pass now that session has ended. Wanted to let everyone know that the mid-block crossing bills did not pass in the Senate. It did pass in the House, but not in the Senate. And of course, they would have been very difficult to implement and very costly as well. I would definitely expect them to be back next year in some form or fashion. Also, the Regional Planning Council bill did not reappear in the last days of session, which is also good news. So, you know, I think all in all, the MPOs had a good session. It was not anything too difficult from the MPO perspective. At the MPOAC, the NARC, which is the National Association of Regional Councils, gave an overview of several of the COVID recovery plans, and we're going to hold discussion on those to a little later in the agenda, specifically relating to transportation funding. Also, if you've probably received a notice, fiscal year 21 notice of funding opportunity for RAISE grants. This is a USDOT grant. They were formerly known as BUILD and before that as TIGER. And the fiscal year 21 appropriations are, the act included $1 billion for RAISE grants, and it's a $25 million cap per project and $100 million statewide. So those applications are due July 12th. Something to keep in mind, it does require a 25% match. So you have to leverage that federal dollar by providing the 25%. We did find out that the Florida DOT is submitting 3 projects statewide, none of which are in the Central Florida area. So wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that. Those applications are can be very difficult to put together, but again, if you have the match and you think that there is a project that is worth moving forward with, you know, let us know, and this is something that you may want to consider as a local government. These particular grants are highly competitive, but it's certainly worth the effort if you have the 25% match. Also wanted to let you know the Trail Wayfinding Signage and Amenities Master Plan. Sarah Crom is the project manager, and the TPO has scheduled 2 wayfinding workshops coming up in May. And this is for multi-use trails and trailheads located in the northern Brevard County area. And this is really an important first step to help establish a preferred design aesthetic for the signage, identify priority destinations along the trails, and select a type of site amenity that will enhance the overall user experience. Also, Transportation Thursday, our next one is called Fdot Partnership. And the previous Transportation Thursday that we held on regional trails, this was one of the items that we heard from some members and people that participated, is that they would like a presentation on Fdot Partnership. And so we're in the process of putting that together, and Secretary Perdue, the District 5 Secretary, has agreed to participate with us. So we're excited about that. So that will be coming up on June 3rd, and you do have a flyer in your package. And then I will end by letting everyone know our next meeting is in July. We don't meet in June, but we would like to get the group back together for the TAC and the CAC to meet together. We'll have to redesign the room a little bit, and we want to do it safely. Of course, we don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, but at this point, we kind of feel as if we need to do that for efficiency. And we have, of course, checked with the Center for Collaboration, and it's not a problem to have 40 plus folks in the room, although they even allow more than that. So we will do that in a manner that will be safe for everyone. And we appreciate your patience and your understanding with us, but we would like to start that in July. And I think, Mr. Chair, that concludes my comments.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Georgiana? Liz?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not real sure what all is included, so if you could just email that.
Absolutely. And I think there is a webinar coming up soon.
There's a series of webinars. I sent it out to the Transportation Subcommittee mailing list, but I can resend that out, and Liz, you should be included. The webinars have been, most of them are fully booked, but they have been adding new ones kind of as they've booked up and as the demand for them has come up.
All right, any other questions? All right, that will take us to item 5, which is our consent agenda. It consists of 3 items: approval of our minutes of our last meeting on March the 8th, a work order for state of the system, and resolution 2119, which would recommend that the board request that the Board of County Commissioners continue as the community transportation coordinator for the county. So is there any items that anybody would like to pull from the consent agenda, or a motion to approve the consent agenda in one motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion from Cliff to approve the consent agenda as presented, and a second from Devin. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The consent calendar is approved. That takes us to item 6A, which I think you have in front of you as well, a slight revision to that item. And it's an amendment to the tip. So we can get a presentation, and then we will conclude that item with a roll call vote.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The DOT has requested an amendment to our currently adopted Transportation Improvement Program. And in your package, the new projects, of course, is the Space Commerce Way, funding for design and construction. And if you remember, that was a project that Space Florida received funding through an infrastructure grant. So this was an extremely important project that goes along with the NASA Causeway. You also have a Space Coast for Independent Living. It's a 5310 capital grant. It's a new transit project, as well as 5339, a large urban capital grant, which is also a new transit project. And then a small urban capital grant for Titusville. So it's 3 capital grants for transit projects, along with the Space Commerce Way project for design and construction. Your add-on is regarding the NASA Causeway Bridge. We got notification one day last week that there was just a slight limit change for the NASA Causeway. And that is extremely important for planning consistency. And so what we have in our Transportation Improvement Program must match what is in the work program. So that is the add-on. So that is all of the projects for the TIP amendment. And it just occurred to me, Mr. Chair, we do not need a roll call vote for the committees, but the TPO Governing Board does need a roll call vote. But we are asking for your approval of this TIP amendment.
All right. Steve or Terry or anybody else on this item? Obviously, there's some SCAT things and Space Commerce Way. And any discussion on this item before we look for a vote? All right, we'll accept the motion to recommend approval of resolution 21-20. Is there a motion? We have a motion from Jenny and a second from Steve. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, since we don't need to do a roll call vote, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. That takes us to item 7, and 7A is a presentation on transportation funding.
I'm going to come up to the podium so I can operate the PowerPoint. So I wanted to give a short overview of transportation funding in Florida, and I thought this might be especially helpful for the new members this year. This is the time of year where we are developing our new list of priority projects. And of course, funding is an extremely important part of that, because that is how we move these important projects forward. Okay. So we'll start out with our mission statement. I think most of you know what that is, but I think this is a good reminder as to why we're here. And we are here to develop and foster realization of a regional multimodal transportation projects and programs that improve the quality of life for Brevard residents, businesses, and visitors. That's what we're about here. And the primary role of the TPO is to prioritize projects that use state and federal funding. So we play an important role in allocating the financial resources for transportation. And to make the most of that role, it requires working very closely with our DOT partners, through which federal dollars flow. And so this is one of the most important things we do. And as my predecessor used to say, it's where the planning meets the money, and that is important. So transportation in the broad context includes all modes, as we know, space, seaports, aviation, et cetera. However, we're going to focus on surface transportation today. And to develop a comprehensive, safe, efficient transportation system, it requires funding from a variety of sources: state, federal, local, and private. For the State Transportation Trust Fund, DOT has three main sources of funding. And this is projected by the Revenue Estimating Conference, which is a group of economists in Tallahassee that forecast gas tax revenues, motor vehicle license fees, initial vehicle registration fees, and so on. And we really rely on State Transportation Trust Fund, and really 2/3 of our revenue comes from the fuel tax. So there is some, that's coming from the rental car surcharge, $2, I think, and some from dock stamps. But most of the funding comes from taxes of motor fuel. 25% or a little more is made up of federal funding, which is the federal apportionment and obligating authority. Then about 18% is made up of toll facilities. And those revenues are projected by independent traffic revenue studies. And as you know, all three have been severely impacted over the past year. So focusing on fuel taxes, this is really divided in three different areas. We have our federal fuel taxes, which is 18.4 cents per gallon. State fuel taxes, 14.3 cents per gallon. And then you have the additional 7.9 cents on every gallon. And then some local fuel taxes are mandated by the state. And some of this is the local option taxes as well. Our federal authorization is the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. We call it the Fast Act, which was signed into law December of 2015. And, as you know, the Fast Act was a 5-year bill. It provided over $300 billion. And it was set to expire December of last year, but it was extended for 1 year. And it is likely there will be a new federal authorization, a new bill, rather than just another extension, which can happen. I think we will have a new piece of legislation coming up. But Florida is referred to as a donor state. For each federal gas tax dollar collected, the state only gets back 95%. One challenge is that the TPO apportionment is also based on a fiscal year 2009 allocation from the 2000 census. And so I've checked with Laura, and it looks like we will have our new census numbers maybe sometime next year. But this is a high growth state, and we are not receiving the allocation due to us based on population growth. So let's talk a little bit about the money, federal funding. Every time you get a gallon of gas, 18.4 cents, we get that back from the federal government in fuel tax. It's not indexed to inflation. 90% of the federal funding comes from pennies per gallon fuel tax, which has not been adjusted since 1993. And for those of you as old as me, Seinfeld and Home Improvement were the two top TV shows back in 1993. That's a long time ago. We are selling less gas per vehicle due to increasing fuel efficiency and, of course, the electric vehicles. The Highway Trust Fund balance has been in a steady decline, requiring general fund infusions to ensure its solvency. Then state funding. The state fuel tax is more diversified and it keeps pace with inflation, and it is adjusted every year automatically. The challenge at the state level is that alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles are going to continue to have an impact. In 2020, Florida had more than 60,000 registered electric vehicles. And the latest study by DOT showed they will impact the Transportation Trust Fund by 2025, and that by 2040, the aggressive forecast shows a 30% reduction in gas tax revenue, and that's pretty significant. Locally imposed fuel taxes. Now, this is as of January of 2020, and by the way, this particular slide was thrown up at an MPOAC meeting by DOT. When they were presenting on funding, but the local option taxes are added to an area's tax base for local infrastructure. And in the Central Florida area, FDOT District 5, 4 of the counties have fully leveraged their local option fuel tax. Sumter, Lake, and Seminole have not fully leveraged their local option, but they have added 1 penny. Orange and Brevard County are the only 2 counties in Central Florida that are, not leveraging any of their local option. In other words, 6 cents is being left on the table. And that is significant. Of course, local funds is not going to be used on state roads, but they can be used on local roads. And we have a lot of local roads, South Babcock, Malabar West, although some of it, the majority of it is in Palm Bay, Hollywood Boulevard, Minton Road, Wickham. It can go on and on. These are very high profile, regionally significant corridors that we cannot use traditional state funding on because they are off the state highway system. So dealing with the balance sheet, the question is how to move forward with both federal and state revenue being challenged. And it seems like our choices are limited and, we have to do more with less. So we can build fewer projects, we can defer projects, we can build different types of projects, focus more on transit, technology, ITS to improve safety and efficiency of the transportation system, which we are doing. We're going to look for ways to be more cost effective. We also need to find new revenue sources, such as grants or public-private partnerships. This is, again, where the local funding is very important. SIGP and TRIP, those are state grant funds that require a 50% match. If you don't have the 50% match, then you can't get in the game. Same way with our USDOT grants that I just discussed. If you don't have the 25% match, you can't even apply for it. You're wasting your time in doing that. And I will end on some of the legislation, some of the acts that have been going through. These are some things to keep our eye on. We have the CARES Act funding, as you know, I think 1.5 billion in revenue in late 2020. The Trump administration passed a COVID relief measure, I think 470 million for the state of Florida. But those funds enabled the department to keep the work program moving forward. And this also included a lot of funding for transit and airports. The CARES Act in March of 2020, which was an extension of the Fast Act. We also have the American Rescue Plan, which is the next big one. 10.2 billion is coming to Florida. And the governor said 2 billion will be used for transportation. And that's huge. And that language is in the back of the appropriations bill. The plan carves out 30.5 billion for transit and 8 billion for airports, but there's no guidance from Federal Highway and FAA on how much of the carve out will actually come to Florida. So that's something we really need to keep our eye on. Then, the American Jobs Plan, $2.3 trillion, of which 932 billion for infrastructure. 571 will be coming for transportation. And a lot of money will be going to the transit, airports, and the ports. 20 billion to safety and 25 billion to equity. So there's a lot of different types of projects in that particular bill. Highway funding is directed towards a fix it first rather than a capacity projects, and which can be problematic for Florida because Florida's infrastructure is in a lot better shape than other parts of the country. And then finally, the Fast Act Reauthorization, that's still to come. That's how we operate as a TPO. So DOT has taken the following positions. The Act must provide state, local, and private partners the long-term funding certainty they need to effectively plan and deliver projects. And such reauthorization must at a minimum address long-term solvency on the Highway Trust Fund in a fiscally responsible manner. But as we move forward, the VMT road usage fee, we are really hoping that in the new Transportation Act, there will be some language where they will start looking at an alternative to the fuel tax for the country. And so that's something that we really want to keep our eye on, because that's really what it's going to take. And as far as the recovery plans and those bills, the DOT, there's still a lot of unknowns. They're not really sure how central office, how they think to best utilize all of this funding for Florida. And it's just really unclear what the criteria will be. But the Florida DOT District 5, they have set up biweekly meetings with each one of the MPOs. So we will be having a biweekly meeting with DOT District 5 to talk about our projects, what we have on our priority list, what is the next phase, how to move these projects forward. And so I think that's being very proactive, since a lot of this is really unknown. So we're really hopeful that we can move some of our high priority projects forward on our priority list and get some things done for surface transportation. So I know this is a high level, quick and dirty little presentation on transportation funding, but I wanted to throw that out there to you all. And that concludes my presentation.
All right. Do we have any questions for Georgiana? Yes.
The barrier, I think, is that will be a discussion with the county commission. Now, as I mentioned to you, our responsibility is prioritizing state and federal. The TPO has no business, or we can't, get involved in the local aspect, our county commission. And I will tell you, they have had a discussion at a budget meeting earlier this year. It was a really good discussion. I know Mark Bernath, Public Works Director, he did a really good presentation discussing the projects that they could be moving forward, the challenges that they have due to leaving that funding on the table, and that also maybe even an infrastructure sales tax could be an option. At that particular budget meeting, because I did watch it, the county commissioners were a little leery about increasing the fuel tax, but they did want to investigate an infrastructure sales tax and let the voters decide. So, people don't like taxes to be raised, but the reality is what I just said, and we have to deal with whatever decisions are made. It's difficult.
Other questions? Yes.
It's on. Okay. Great presentation. Thanks, Georgiana. I just wanted to mention, I guess over the past few weeks, I've been back and forth to Lakeland a few times. I haven't been that way probably for 6 months to a year. And there are intermodal distribution centers popping up on the I-4 corridor like crazy. Huge, trucking distribution centers. So I'm assuming there's impact fees for those. I don't know if they're adjacent to state roads or county roads, but how does impact fees come into the funding mechanism? Does DOT get some of that if it is a state road? And to that, the junction between 417 and I-4 is on a good day, you're sitting in traffic for 10 minutes, and just the timing, I guess when I went, I hit it both going both ways, stuck in traffic for a half an hour. And it just seems like, I know it takes a long while to get a project through. But I-4 was just between Orlando and Tampa was just not too long ago was widened, and it's already seems to be obsolete already.
Yes. Development, that's a difficult subject. Now, as new development goes in, a particular development does have to contribute for the impact to a roadway. But of course, it's the local government that approves development. So, and probably one of our local governments might be able to explain this better than me, but as transportation impact fees are collected, that funding does go for transportation impacts. The issue, the concern is that the impacts put on a road probably far exceed sometimes, in some cases, the improvements that are actually being done. For instance, widening a road. Correct. That's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. It's a chicken or an egg. I mean, you want development to come in, right? But yet it takes so long to build, to put in capacity to widen roads. You're always behind continually. So yes, I think public-private partnerships, that's something that is really important. I know it's being, done in a lot of different areas. Brightline, for instance, there should be, to me, for this to be a private company willing to do this, I think is exceptional. And there should be a place for private funding in the fabric of transportation. And I think that is a perfect example of where, this is good for Florida to have an alternative means of transportation.
Those impact fees funnel down to DOT eventually noting, delay.
Not that I'm aware of. Yes.
So there's actually two major sources of roadway improvements from development. The first is called concurrency through the planning process, and that's where development pays for its proportionate share of improvements. So larger projects get analyzed and there's a contribution. For us, a lot of times we actually have them construct improvements, whether that's on state system, US 192, or county system, Minton Road, for example. So that's one source. The second source is impact fees. So that's a fee based upon local ordinances to offset the impact of future development. So there's actually sort of two local sources. And the third local source, if it's available, potentially is other than, local share of the gas tax, is redevelopment. A lot of redevelopment agencies will use some of the increment that they get towards roadway improvements or match and so forth. So there are some local ability to, positively impact the transportation system, but they sort of pale in dollars compared to what Georgiana was talking about. But there are some local dollars available through development and taxes and fees.
Thank you. Right.
Jenny.
I know for the city of Melbourne, we have a percentage that goes towards city roads and a percentage that goes to state and county roads, because we recognize that trips are not just on city roads. And so that is where we come up with a lot of our match money for projects, or it's where we partner with the county to do a project on a county road. And so I think that answers your question on do any of the impact fees go towards county or state roads, and that is what we do with the development.
Very good.
I had one last question, Georgiana. You talked a little bit about vehicle miles traveled as a potential change in tax source from consumption of fuels. Have any states done that? I know 25 years ago, the state of Oregon was looking very heavily at that. I don't have any implemented that.
I think there's been pilot projects. I think with Oregon, Utah, there's been several of them. When NARC gave the presentation at the MPOAC, they actually said 35 states either have a pilot project for VMT or they are conducting a study to look into it. Florida, we have yet to conduct a study. And when DOT Central Office, one thing they mentioned when I checked on it, I think it was last year, is that they were looking to get approval from the legislature to do some sort of either a pilot project or a study on the state level. But hopefully in this legislation, in our new federal legislation, there will be something to assist the whole country and give us some guidance on how to move forward. All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That moves us ahead to item 7B, which is the 2021 projects process overview. Sarah.
All right. So good morning. I'm Sarah Crawl, the Senior Transportation Planner. As I believe most of you know, because you're involved with the Transportation Subcommittee, each year we develop a list of project priorities, and basically that list goes through our TAC, CAC, BPAC, and eventually to our governing board for adoption. It will be going in July 8th to the governing board. So in anticipation for our next meeting, it being adoption, we wanted to do a review on the process, discuss at a very high level what applications were received this year, and to basically provide you with a prep for that adoption in July. So where does the list of project priorities fit into our planning process? And this is really important. Projects are identified in the long-range transportation plan. This can either be through the cost feasible list, as well as also our other master plans, such as Vision Zero, Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan, ITS Master Plan, eventually Transportation Resiliency Master Plan when that's completed. But if a project is not somehow within the LRTP, either through the cost feasible or one of those boxed funds from the master plans, it is not eligible to go onto the list of project priorities. So the projects must be in there. Then basically the locals, you guys have the opportunity to submit an application each year. That is how it gets on the list of project priorities. And eventually, hopefully, fingers crossed, into the tip where it's received funding and is actually being implemented. So kind of to get to drill down into what's happening in that middle box, the blue box list of project priorities, is this larger graph. And so basically we go through a call for projects, applications are submitted, we evaluate and rank the projects, which is right now where we're at right now, is the projects have been, or the applications were submitted, we've gone through the ranking process, the list has been sent out to the Transportation Subcommittee and will be reviewed on May 20th, off the top of my head, that feels right. And then in July, it'll be adopted. Once adopted, it will be submitted to Fdot, and then they will review applications. They'll meet with the locals, they'll vet the projects, basically make sure these projects actually are feasible. And then we'll begin coordinating with them for project programming, which is where money is actually put on the projects. The work program's developed, and then it's implemented either by Fdot or via the local agency partnership program. So kind of the schedule, actually putting dates to it, is we did our call for projects on January 11th. We've now worked through receiving the applications. Something new we did this year is on April 6th, we met with our environmental partners and gave them the opportunity to review the projects to identify, are there environmental partnerships? Are there projects that are just raising a huge red flag of, we know that there's 50 crested caracaras in that corridor or something like that. And it was our first time doing this really. And so it's definitely a program that needs to be developed and honed in. And then on May 20th, the Transportation Subcommittee will be meeting to really finalize that ranking. So going back to kind of what I was talking about with the LRTP and submitting of a project, so basically walking through the process of the actual submittal. So there is kind of a set of questions that if you're sitting there and you're thinking about submitting a project, you need to go through. And we did actually receive several applications this year where a project was not eligible. So first off, is it in the LRTP? Is it functionally classified to receive federal aid? Is it ready to be implemented within the next 5 years? That's a biggie. Is we don't want projects sitting on the priority list that aren't moving forward or that aren't able to be moved forward at this time. Is the project consistent with local government comprehensive plans? That means is it in your comp plan? Has it or has it gone to your council in some way to be approved? Basically, we want to make sure that it's been vetted through all parties before it reaches us. And that also provides the opportunity for this next one, which is, does it have local support? Because if it's gone in front of your council or your committee, the locals have had the opportunity to at least know of its existence. Has the public been informed or engaged? And if the project is off the state highway system, is the agency certified to do a local agency partnership project? So once basically all those questions have been answered, we decide the project is eligible. It is then ranked. Either it's first ranked by a quantitative score based on criteria, which I'm just going to pop ahead. And basically the criteria is in these 5 categories: safety, transportation, land use, sustainability, resiliency, innovation, multimodal. This directly aligns with our governing board strategic plan. So this is the direction that our governing board has asked us to go. Projects can also receive a qualitative score based on a consensus recommendation of the Transportation Subcommittee. That was last year was the first time we did this, and I think it went really smoothly. And it definitely was basically the purpose of the qualitative score is, we all know no matter how much data you throw at something, there's always a piece of the picture that you're not seeing. And so that provides that human aspect. This is a regionally significant project. This is a huge impact to the community, or it has some sort of special elevation that needs to be brought to it. And then finally, the committees and board, so the TAC in July, can make the recommendation to move a project based on consensus of this committee, and that does have to be approved by the governing board. So in July, you could literally go, you know what, this roadway project really deserves to be higher up. We make the recommendation to the governing board to move it X, Y, and Z location. So that's basically the full process. As far as new projects go, these are the applications we received. 2 of them were actually being put back on the priority list due to they had either previously been pulled because of funding, or they had received funding and have been deleted now. So the Traffic Management Center, the Space Coast Trail, State Road A1A, Volunteer Way to Roosevelt, that is a sidewalk project with the City of Satellite. State Road A1A 520 to International, that is a complete street feasibility study with Cape Canaveral. State Road 520 from Banana River Drive to State Road A1A, that is a vulnerability analysis of the Causeway. And then Minton Road from Jupiter Boulevard to Malabar, that is a feasibility study for a widening. So a lot of studies this year. So after we plugged all of the new projects in, these were really kind of the top priorities. Not much has changed. And that kind of goes back to what Georgiana was talking about with funding, is it's really kind of the same projects that have been there. Ellis Road, 528, all of the A1A projects. We have several A1A projects. The 2 new ones, of course, are Traffic Management Center and the Space Coast Trail. Clear Lake Road from Michigan Ave to Industry Road, and the Malabar projects. Now, there are other top priorities, obviously, but these are the ones that have been really sitting there for a while, and we really want to start to move them forward. And then, so the final piece of this whole process is that the public does have the opportunity to review the list of project priorities. We do this every year during our annual open house, which Abby will talk about more during her report. So with that, I'll take any questions regarding the process. You obviously haven't seen the list yet unless you're on the Transportation Subcommittee. So, because that is a draft list. But, we'll definitely review the list in more details in July.
All right, questions for Sarah? All right, thank you very much, Sarah.
All right, I'm moving on to
Keep
my
going.
presentation.
Item 7C.
All right, so switching gears to the Transportation Resiliency Master Plan, we just wanted to provide you an update because this is a 2-year project. And so we definitely don't want anyone to forget that it's happening or feel like they're out of the loop, because eventually we'll be asking for adoption. So in October 2020 was when we issued the notice to proceed. And there is a couple things in your agenda package. So first is the Resiliency Relay. And this is kind of just a every once in a while a little update that we're sending out to our task force, and also I'll be trying to stick them in the agendas so that you guys stay up to date. So this is kind of a opportunity to do kind of a education piece on to our boards and committees so that you feel more prepared for as we present and eventually adopt the resiliency master plan. And also just give you an update on the activities that have been going on. So first off, what is resilience? We are working within the regional definition, which was defined by the East Central Florida Regional Resiliency Collaborative. The ability to bounce forward, absorb, recover, and get better in the face of short-term shocks like hurricanes or infrastructure failures, and long-term stressors like affordable housing, aging infrastructure, shifting economic trends, and climate change. So that's essentially the framework of resiliency that we're working within, but we want to narrow that down into what is transportation resiliency. And that is the ability of the transportation system to recover and regain functionality after a major disruption or disaster. So I want to make sure that we're always thinking this is a transportation resiliency master plan. So this is obviously building on previous work that we started this discussion in 2016 regarding resiliency when staff began attending sea level rise, sketch tool and planning workshops, and that eventually led us to developing our Space Coast TPO sea level rise vulnerability assessment that was completed in, I believe it was 2018, February 2018. And then that was a really great conversation piece to lead into incorporating resiliency into our governing board strategic plan, our project prioritization methodology, and then eventually also our long-range transportation plan. And so that's all that work has kind of led to the development of this transportation resiliency master plan, because we need a document to help us guide forward our work in resiliency. It can't just be a buzzword that we stick in our strategic plans and use for prioritization. We have to have an actual document and plan to integrate it into all of our activities. So the purpose, develop a roadmap to a more resilient transportation system in Brevard, identify shocks and stressors. When I say shocks and stressors, that's basically like the impacts. So a hurricane, a major roadway event, infrastructure failure, infrastructure aging, sea level rise, etc. Prioritize our roadways and corridors for resiliency, and to actually develop tools and tactics to work on those prioritized corridors. This will, as I mentioned, it's a 2-year plan. It started in October 2020. So it has to be a transportation focus. It has to answer what puts people and infrastructure at risk. So that's your shocks and stressors. And which infrastructure is the most important to protect? What is really going to be those vulnerable roads that are key to our community getting together? So we have a lot of different individuals involved in this plan or project. I've already spoke to several of you throughout this process. Obviously, our boards and committees. We also have developed a task force. They met in January. They're meeting again later this month. We are having some focus groups that'll, once we've designated which shocks and stressors we're going to focus in, we'll have focus groups on those shocks and stressors. So who are the experts on sea level rise or aging infrastructure or what have you as the shocks and stressors? Key stakeholders. And then we are also identifying transportation disadvantaged areas and having those meetings. We actually have our first transportation disadvantage meeting on Wednesday. So work so far, as I mentioned, task force meeting, we've had the first one. We've developed a project website. We've held an environmental stakeholder work session, as well as also an economic stakeholder session. It was really interesting. It was very different feedback that we received. But in order for us to create a resilient transportation system, we need to loop in the economy, the community, and the environment. We all have to work together. Data collection analysis, a lot of data collection. And then we've been working on a transportation disadvantage analysis and area identification. We've also started a huge public involvement piece, because when you say the word resiliency, how many people, how many members of your municipalities do you think really knows what you're saying? And then you even add the word transportation, so now you just have a million syllables. And it's just, we want to make sure that we're engaging the community in an effective way, because if we ever need to ask them for feedback on something, we want to know that they know what they're giving feedback on. So we developed goals and objectives, which is basically educate about resiliency, disseminate info about the plan, and provide high-level feedback and input. We have the project website, quarterly social media campaigns. We just wrapped up our last one. And then the resiliency relays, as well as also we've done 2 presentations. And oh, what did I just do? I was trying to start the little video. This is just an example of one of the graphics that Abby developed. So as part of that, we've done some surveying. These came from next door. And basically what we wanted to know is, how familiar is the public with transportation resiliency, and how concerned are they, or how important do they think it is? And so for the most part, when we asked how familiar are you with the concept of transportation resiliency, they said, what's that? So obviously we have a long ways to go in educating them. And then when we asked how concerned are you about our transportation systems resiliency, they said it's vital to our community. So they're not sure what it is, but they really know that it's important. So that shows us kind of the direction that we need to go. So our next steps clearly continue to public outreach and education. We're starting our community conversations with the transportation disadvantaged communities later this week. As I mentioned, task force meeting number 2. We're then going to basically in task force number 2, we're going to identify which are the up to 6 shocks and stressors we're focusing in on. And then we'll begin the focus group discussions on those shocks and stressors and analyzing on a corridor level. So with that, if you have any feedback about what you think are the shocks and stressors that are most important for us to focus in on, or any questions or comments.
Right. Input, questions, comments for Sarah?
All right, thank you.
All right, that takes us to item 8A, which is the Florida Department of Transportation report. And the action item there is to accept the annual joint certification. So on top of the normal report, we actually have an action item.
Virginia, we do not have you muted. You can unmute yourself as you Virginia, we do not have you muted. You can unmute yourself if you wish to speak.
Hey, good morning. I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I do not have anything additional to report for this morning's meeting. Our information is included with the construction report, and the only additional information was the tip letter that was already discussed on the agenda.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? All right, so I would look for a motion to accept the annual joint certification. Is there a motion? We have a motion from Liz. Is there a second? Second from Jenny. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 8B, which is the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Advisory Committee. Sarah again.
All right, so our last formal BPAC meeting was March 29th. We had a member showcase presentation from one of our members, Mr. Murray Hahn. The FDOT work program recap presentation which was essentially the same FDOT work program presentation you received, but honed in on just what are the bicycle, pedestrian, trails projects. And then we gave an update on the, FDOT gave an update on their development of the D5 Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan presentation. So FDOT D5 is currently developing a bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And I believe that's anticipated to be completed fall this year. So we also held our annual walking workshop. Thank you so much, Melbourne, for having us, and for Tammy Gillen and Todd Corwin for hosting us and guiding us through Hickory Street for our walking workshop on April 26th. It was really great weather and a fun time for all. May is National Bike Month. Visit bikeleague.org/bike month for more information. And then also, in case you missed it, we did hold our ADA bus stop training. We did it one session in person that was held right here. And then we did it online as well. So it has been recorded from the online session, and that is on our YouTube. And that's all I have today.
All right. Any questions on the Bicycle Pedestrian Trails Advisory Committee? All right. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
That takes us to public engagement. Abby.
Good morning. My name is Abby Hemingway, and I'm the Public Engagement Officer for the Space Coast TPO. And today we're going to chat about some upcoming public outreach opportunities. Before we jump into events and social media highlights for the months of May and June, I did want to just briefly touch on some wins for our organization for the past few months. So first, I wanted to talk about at the end of March, TPO staff partnered with FDOT District 5 and Alert Today, Florida to promote Bike Month by coordinating a safety education pop-up event on the US 192 corridor in West Melbourne, right near Melbourne Square Mall. Staff and volunteers were stationed along the roadway holding signs to remind drivers to look right for bicyclists, and they were also inside the mall speaking with shoppers. We were able to operate as a visual cue to drivers to look for bicyclists and to share the road. The event led to an extended relationship with the mall, which agreed to showcase bicycle safety literature within the table inserts in their food court. The event was a huge success and a great example about how partnership is vital when educating the public about traffic safety. So you can see a little collage up there of our efforts. And then in April, the TPO received an image award from the Space Coast chapter of the Florida Public Relations Association for its 2020 Mitten Road Feasibility Study virtual public meeting that was held last August. The local image awards competition is conducted annually to recognize outstanding public relations programs and to encourage and promote the development of PR in our area. This award recognizes the TPO submission as the top scoring entry for the public relations program, and it was a great way to celebrate the end of the study. So kind of moving on to upcoming things, as Sarah mentioned, May is Bike Month, and we are partnering with the American League of Bicyclists to celebrate biking as transportation, recreation, and essential to our well-being. We know that whether you bike there for fitness, for fun, with family, or for trips, biking is now a part of our connected communities and making our planet healthier and also keeping our streets safe. May is also Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. I'm sure that it's to no surprise that motorcyclists are significantly overrepresented in traffic crashes and fatalities every year. In 2019 alone, there were over 5,000 motorcyclists killed in traffic crashes. They account for 14% of the total highway fatalities that year in 2019. So this month we'll be promoting safety messages on our platforms with our partners to raise awareness that motorcycles, to look twice for motorcyclists. And we'll also be highlighting the importance of wearing a DOT compliant helmet. Other social media spotlights. This week is National Police Week, so make sure you give your local agency a shout out. Next week is National EMS Week. And then of course, Memorial Day, we always promote safe driving and paying remembrance. And then as Georgiana mentioned earlier, on June 3rd, we will be hosting our Transportation Thursday that will focus on our partnership and coordination efforts with the Florida Department of Transportation. And we'll be posting that registration information in our newsletter next week, and also it will get posted to our website. And then finally, to recap, on June 16th, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m., we will be hosting our annual open house. It will be virtual this year. Last year, we saw a huge increase in attendance by making it virtual. And it's also a better time for most attendees. So our annual open house, for those who have never attended before, it's an opportunity to discuss trending projects in Brevard and the proposed 2022-26 Transportation Improvement Program will be discussed. This is a chance for the public to share their thoughts on the proposed projects for the next 5 years. We'll also be chatting about new aspects of transportation planning and how they're transforming the ways we work, play, and live in our communities. So we're very excited about that. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Abby? All right, and congratulations on the Minton Award. I think very collaborative effort on the part of the staff and well earned. That takes us to item 8D, transfer report. Terry.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give a brief update on things that are going on with Space Coast Area Transit. As discussed in my most recent presentations, our service to Central Titusville, Port St. John, and our hourly headways along the beach side has launched back on April 3rd. The routes are doing pretty decent. We're going to be doing some tweaks to Route 30 because of the schedule concerns that we're experiencing with it. It also is actually carrying a large portion, a significant portion of the riders from the 26 that it broke apart from. So we are looking at that as a successful launch and expecting to be continuing to operate that route as it stands, but just with tweaks to the schedule. Excuse me. We also launched the ITS component to our passenger-facing component to our service, where the passengers now have the ability to see the routes en route and also know exactly when they're going to arrive at their particular destination or know when to expect the bus. And also our mobile fare payment via an application and then show that information to the operator versus paying a fare at the fare box directly. So those are two also areas that we launched on April 3rd as well. In conjunction with Kim at the TPO, we're going out and doing some outreach to our passengers at high use areas like Hammock Landing, Titus Landing. We did those last Friday. Next week, we're going to do we're going to do Cocoa Terminal and we're going to do Shepherd Park and Cocoa Beach as well. And then not too distant future, we're going to do Melbourne Square Mall and also hopefully opportunity to do at Melbourne International Airport. So these are all areas we're trying to make sure our passengers are aware of the opportunities that are available to them and launch this service. And last but not least, our ridership continues to rebound. We're just about 20% of where we were before pandemic. And actually last month during March, we're at the highest level of ridership that we've been in almost a year. We're just like at right around 136,000 overall for the month, which is just slightly below where we were overall for monthly ridership. The applications that I mentioned are both available on our 321transit.com website and also the app. So if you also want to visit either of those two, you can actually click on the Where's My Bus option and see the buses in motion as they're traveling along the route that operate in your respective areas. So that's it for now, unless there are any particular questions. Bob?
Terry, I just wanted to thank you for the recent bus stop ADA webinars and the in-person meetings you put on. I attended the webinar and lots of great information, lots of resources, much more complicated than I ever thought it was, but they did the team that put it on did a great job. So appreciate your involvement in putting that together.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks for Sarah and the TPO staff as well for their work on that. And one of the areas we really want to make sure of is when local municipalities are reviewing these plans, that they understand exactly what is required, not just a matter of putting the pad out because it's a 5x8, but there are certain components that are required. And we're noticing that there are construction, you have leniency in construction projects that you don't have with ADA requirements. And we're seeing that there's a difference there where, as Sarah and I witness this one all the time, there's a slope to and from the actual board and lighting pad that's significantly more or greater than where we would like it to be, however the project is done. So we want to make sure that when their plans are reviewed, that the reviewers understand this information is a requirement to make it ADA compliant, not just simply a nice sidewalk and a piece of connecting to the bus stop.
And I didn't mean to leave Sarah out, but yeah, it was,
So I
it was a
definitely
great,
give them a lot of credit because it was
the interesting thing where I guess you mentioned the rogue benches that show up with like companies' slogans on it, and all of a sudden there's a bench that shows up at a bus stop, and that takes perhaps a compliant bus stop out of compliance. And like I said, it was really good information, and I know it's something that we're looking at, at the port. We want to make sure that the bus stops we put in are meeting the standards. So thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you, Bob.
All right, other questions for Terry? All right, thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you.
That takes us to item 8E, local government report. Does anybody want to report anything from your agency to share with the group? All right, seeing none, unless there are any other items for discussion, we will adjourn to our July meeting. There is no June meeting, so we will see you all after the 4th of July.
Just one note, July never had a staff report because of conflict schedule. We meet on Wednesday, on Monday, or Tuesday.
All right, we will see you on Wednesday, July the 7th. All right, this meeting is adjourned.